Okay, and that's our 25 seconds of silence. Next is our 3210 for our sync. So 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Good enough for government work.
Audio check, check, check. Well, no, wait a minute. I'm not getting anything here.
Your mic's not picking up anything?
No, Audacity's not picking up anything. Audio. What on earth? Recording device default. That should be right. Start monitoring. Audio. Yeah, that should be good. Audio check, 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 check. Okay. Yeah, for some strange reason it wasn't working until I.
Hello. Come on. There we go.
All right, let's
Are,
do it
are we
again.
streaming?
We're streaming, yeah, but we're not. I'm not on Audacity yet.
Okay, so
Start over.
start all the way over. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop my recording. Control A. Right. And delete. And go back to the beginning. And all right, ready?
Yeah.
All right, first up is the 3, 2, 1 record. So
Gotcha.
3, 2, 1 record. All right, that was our 25 seconds of silence. And next up, we're going to do our sync. So 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
All right.
I don't know.
How are we coming on the live stream?
It's good. Excellent connection.
All right, let me mute that. Switch to Linux. Can hear us. That's perfect.
Oh. Hey. Good to have you on.
It's always nice to have a listener. Oh, my allergies are going to kill me today.
Okay. Let's see here.
Are we ready to?
If you
Kick
think
this
your
off?
allergies are going to mess with you, I can do it.
I got it.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me. Okay. Put on my broadcaster voice.
We're professionals.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 403, recorded on Sunday, the 8th of January, 2023. This is the first time for the new year, and I'm Joe.
And first time listener, long time caller, I'm Bill.
First up in the news, Linux Mint 21.1 Vera released. Goodbye SHA-1 NIST retires 27-year-old widely used cryptographic algorithm. PineTab 2 announced. More developers reportedly now use Linux than Mac OS. Then, in security and privacy, serious Linux kernel security hole is uncovered. And in our wanderings, Moss is in Atlanta this week, but has sent in his predictions. Joe does HPR. Bill sets up servers. And then in our innards section, we go over last year's predictions and our predictions for this new year. And finally, we have some feedback and a couple of suggestions. Well, first up in the news, Linux Mint 21.1 Vera has been released.
Yeah,
There
and I'm
is nothing really
updated
listed
to it.
there. Yep. And the Cinnamon version is released. New features, new version of Linux Mint contains many improvements. The release notes provide important information about known issues as well as explanations, workarounds, and solutions, and you can find those in the link provided in the show notes. Um, the update path is not available yet, but should be available soon. And then there are a bunch of links in the link to actually get it downloaded.
Well, it does show up on the update manager if you're on 21.
Okay, so it is
Yeah,
in the update manager now. So I
right.
guess the
Yeah.
link needs to be updated. But yeah.
It was actually, it
Okay.
feels like a huge update,
Does
really.
it?
Because, yeah,
Does it?
well, I mean, he's changed the color of the folders. Um, well, with a default install, that is. You get more of a vanilla sort of looking folder color scheme, and then
Instead of the minty green.
right, you can go back to that. It's still the Mint. I think it's called Mint Y Legacy, but
Hmm.
the default is this vanilla kind of setup with like a green, and there's a different color. He he's updated to all these different colors of ribbons that are on the bottom right corner of all the folders. It's kind of cool. The only thing I had to change back the way it was the he went with this new cursor scheme that sometimes you wonder what people were thinking, but it's kind of like a rounded corner triangle looking thing, and it's it's modern looking enough, I suppose, but it's I
So
don't
you're
know.
telling me I should do the update mid show, right?
Yeah, right now, do it. Hit the
Right now.
button.
Right now. Yeah, yeah.
We live
Okay.
on the edge here on mintcast, but
Uh, well, it
yeah,
shouldn't
as
cause a
far as
problem as long
cinnamon
as I
goes,
don't
anyway.
restart.
What's that?
It shouldn't cause a problem as long as I don't restart.
Well, I mean, it removes. I think in my case, it removed about 9 packages. So I
Don't
guess
do it
as
right
long as it's
now.
in RAM.
Yeah.
But I can't speak for the Mate or the XFCE release, but I can.
It
It
didn't say
feels
that those were available yet. I don't know if
okay.
they are.
Yeah, this actually feels. I know that the upgrade to 21 was huge, but this has got more of a look and feel difference than the upgrade to 21 was.
Yeah.
So
Scrolling through, it looks like there's a lot of updates, including full flat pack integration.
yeah, that's another thing that's actually kind of cool. You've actually got your flat packs in the update manager. You could always do the automation with the flat packs updating at startup, which that's kind of taken the snap approach to it. Where it's kind of done seamlessly in the background, and I've kind of had mixed opinions about that. That it's in the I like that it's in the update manager listed and showing us when it's available, and it's handled basically alongside all the other updates. But yeah,
Okay. Moving on. Goodbye, Sha 1. NIST retires 27-year-old widely used cryptographic algorithm from the Hacker News. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, an agency within the Department of Commerce, announced December 15th that it's formally retiring the SHA-1 cryptographic algorithm. SHA-1, short for Secure Hash Algorithm 1, is a 27-year-old hash function used in cryptography and has since been deemed broken owing to the risk of collision attacks. In February 2017, a group of researchers from CWI Amsterdam and Google disclosed the first practical technique for producing collisions on SHA-1, effectively undermining the security of the algorithm. Now, I haven't seen anyone using SHA-1 in a long time, so I don't think that's really all that much of a hassle that they're retiring it now after 27 years.
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, it's useful information for the sake of people that have got some really legacy systems going on, and sometimes you need something like this to get people to update their
Right, right.
infrastructure. Uh,
Okay. But yeah, there isn't a whole lot to say about that. Pretty cut and dry, and I don't really think it has that much of an impact.
no, not really. Of course, we say
Okay.
that, and then somebody's gonna, oh man, this
No, I
was
hope they do. I'd love.
seismatic.
I hope they. I hope they do reply and tell us all about how it had some major effect. Because I'd love some more feedback.
That would, yeah, yeah. Some real feedback would be good.
Mm.
Hint, hint, audience.
Okay, moving on. The Pine Tab 2 is announced, and this is from Pine 64. An explanation of what happened with the original Pine Tab. In a nutshell, it fell victim to pandemic and post pandemic production issues and other project priorities. The new one sports a metal case which is easy to disassemble for repair and hardware hacking. It features the RK3566, a great system on a chip for a tablet due to low power consumption and low thermals. It has two USB-C ports. One's a USB 3.0, one's a USB 2.0 speeds, and the 2.0 is dedicated for charging. The micro HDMI port for video output, micro SD slot, and a headphone jack, and a 2 megapixel and 5 megapixel camera. It'll be available in two configurations, either the 8 gig of RAM, 128 gig flash, or the 4 gig of RAM, 64 gig of flash storage. Launch and price point not yet known. Expected sometime after CNY. Dev units available soon, prior to CNY.
I'm sure you were hoping that I knew what CNY stood
I'm
for.
hoping you do. I didn't put that there, so what
Thanks,
is
Moss. Now, I suppose if I sat here long enough, I could figure it out. But
New Year something? Chinese New
uh,
Year? Is it the
there you go,
Chinese New
Chinese
Year?
New Year.
Uh huh.
Expected sometime after Chinese New Year.
I have no idea.
Well,
But
let's go with that.
we do appreciate Moss putting in all the news in the show notes
I
for us
certainly
since he's
do.
not going to be here because it wouldn't have gotten done. We'd just be innards and bi-weeklies, and that would be it. But
Um,
no, now the Pine Tab 2 is interesting because if I remember right, from their website, it can either run Android or Linux out of the box, and
and
you can like go back and forth. That's one of the great things about like the Pine phone too. I love all the stuff that comes out of Pine, but
it's actually a pretty. Either way, the 8 gigabyte or the 4 gigabyte, that's actually a respectable device in terms of power. I mean, if it was
yeah,
under $200, it would be
is it?
right
I think
on.
it is.
Because if I could
Oh,
put
Londoner put those in, not Moss. What's it stand for, Londoner?
Help Londoner, um,
He is listening. Calendar New Year.
calendar New Year,
And
huh?
Londoner put those in, not Moss. So
Yeah, we'll make that
that's our
clear.
correction
Thanks.
there. Thank you, Londoner. We really love having all the news done in there for us. So calendar New Year.
I it cannot be understated or overstated, I should say, the
We greatly
contribution
appreciate.
that Londoner makes to this show. I remember thinking of him in before I started on the show. I thought of him as kind of a shadowy figure that was kind of turning the knobs in the background, and he certainly is. So, yeah, thanks to Lunder for everything you do. But yeah, that's a respectable device, and if it's under $200, I'd
It
probably
might
buy
be.
5 of them.
I'm not sure on the price on that, but it's got to be close to that $200 mark.
I mean, I wouldn't mind having it just to put Lineage or something like that on it. That way you'd have access
And
to.
that link has a bit more stuff on it too if you scroll down far enough, because it also talks about the updated version of the Pine Sol, which will give stats over Bluetooth.
You got one of those, don't you?
I have the original Pine Sol. This is the Pine Sol 2 that it's
Oh,
talking
okay.
about. I really like my Pine Sol, but and I don't really understand the whole point of having the stats come up on a web page over Bluetooth or anything like that. But
Just
maybe
because
I'm
you
just too
can.
old.
It's
Maybe I'm just old.
full on nerdy stuff.
Yeah. Well, I like nerd stuff, but
I
come
do
on.
too.
Long as my soldering iron gets hot enough to melt solder,
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay with it. Maybe that's my problem. I'm old.
Somebody must have been sitting with their soldering iron and thinking to themselves, this is really great, but you know what would be even better?
If it had its
Is
own
if
web page.
if it if it could connect to an API or connect to Bluetooth, and I could find out exactly what the temperature is right down to a half a degree centigrade.
Now, and I understood the whole having it programmable so you can adjust the ramp up time and how
Right.
long it takes before it goes to sleep and all that jazz. But yeah, I think it's getting to be a little bit over the top.
I don't know though. I don't want to stifle anybody's creativity with these things though, because it is there. I appreciate there being something out there that we do just because we can, and then you end up learning from the process of making things like that, how to make other things.
I will mention that the Pine Tab 2 is not for sale yet, but on their website, but the Pine Tab 1 is for sale, and with a case it comes out to $120.
Okay, that's man, you can't beat that.
But they have
Um,
the older all-winter A64 chipset in there, the Cortex A53 instead of the RK.
mm, I don't know. I'd be interested to get my hands on one of these second
Yeah,
generation.
um, I'm less interested in tablets that aren't running like laptop processors.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know. I've always been kind of fond of just sticking to the Android ecosystem. That way, you've got for in my case, for example, I wouldn't have any use for it unless I could put Android apps on it. And the kids, they've got their games that they like to play. They've got older Android tablets that have 1 gig memory on
Well,
them, and
I tend to treat my tablets like laptops and
uh,
run full Linux on them and actually use them to do work like stuff.
and of course, performance is hit and miss
It
depending
depends.
on yeah.
The Dell Latitude line, yeah, they work great. It might as well be a laptop. All right, do you want to read the next one?
Sure. Well, one more thing. The only thing, the closest thing I had to that was a Surface 4, which is a properly powerful device. But
It
Linux
is,
on
but
that was,
yeah, on any of the Microsoft Surface devices, it's a little hit or miss because you have to put in the custom kernel, and then
yeah,
the
and
custom
I didn't like
kernel
that.
has to be maintained by somebody in order to be able to keep using it. And yeah, I mean the Surface is a great device, but it's just meant for it to be difficult to run Linux on.
And there must not be enough demand for it in
Stick
our
with
little
the
world.
Yeah, stick with the Dell Latitudes for
Yeah.
running Linux.
Anyway, moving on. More developers reportedly now use Linux than Mac OS. And this is from Tech Radar. New 2022, that is December 27th, figures have claimed some surprising results in what the most popular operating systems were in 2022. The 2022 Stack Overflow Developer Survey reports that Linux based software is now more popular than Apple's macOS as developers apparently flock to other systems. Linux distros, representing 40% for both personal and professional use, which are recognized as being some of the most customizable and adaptive operating systems for developers. The 40% share is up from around one quarter in each of the previous 5 years, which shows a significant shift to Linux that may continue in 2023. However, macOS figures continue to be strong in an area of the market that's becoming increasingly expensive, representing 31% of personal users and 33% of professional users. Maybe less shocking is Windows' popularity, which sees it take the top position as the most used operating system, with almost two-thirds, or 62%, of personal users preferring the OS and nearly a half, or 49%, of professional users opting for Microsoft's product. The year of 2022 has also been the year of rising popularity for Windows 11, according to monthly stat counter figures, which show a steady increase from less than 3% market share in January 2022 to an adoption rate of over 16% in November 2022. Windows 10 remains the most popular version of the OS to date, representing a significant 70% of the OS distributions. Moreover, StatCounter reports that Windows accounts for 75% of all computer users globally, excluding and excluding developers. macOS takes just 16% of the market, while Linux accounts for less than 3%, further implying that this is a popular go-to for developers and programmers. You know, the problem I've always had with these numbers that these people come up with is just the simple fact that the only reason Windows would maintain any sort of popularity is simply because that's the operating system that's sitting on that machine when they went and bought it off the shelf.
Yeah, and you know they're talking about the increase of Windows 11 from 3% to 16%.
It's
Like
because
that's
people are buying
somehow
new computers.
surprising.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you go
I
buy a new
mean,
computer, it's going to have 11 on it. You know.
it was it's kind of surprising that 3% had it on there at the beginning of the year and only 16% had it on there by the end of the year, because that means that Windows isn't forcing the update yet. Hey, I bet next year it goes from 16% to like 80%.
Yeah. And then even higher in 2025 when is it 2025 when
I don't
Windows
know when they're doing it.
I think it's I think that's right. Somebody can email into the show and let me know if I'm wrong about that, but I think that's the year Windows 10 drops off official support, which
No,
is going to
that means that I'll be able to get a whole bunch of really good used laptops and tablets at really low prices because they won't be able to run Windows 11.
properly powerful devices. My daughter's got an Omen with an i7 in it, and I have no idea why it won't update to Windows 11. It is a properly powerful device,
My gaming
and
laptop here has an i7 in it. Granted, you know, it's like 8th gen or something,
right,
but it's still 8th gen. So it's not like
yeah,
it's, unusable.
and that'll be a powerhouse with Linux on it.
Yeah,
So
oh, it's running Linux. Well, it's dual booted.
I don't have anything left dual booting. I've got Windows 11 and a couple of KVMs. Once I've figured out the maddening series of things you have to do to get Windows 11 and a KVM, but I've got it working.
Well, there's still some issues with like Proton and certain games, and
Yeah.
NVIDIA graphics card, which is what this has. So it's just easier for now for me to dual boot and switch over to Windows when I want to play certain games.
And that was my reasoning for doing it on the Omen, well, my Omen upstairs, and then this machine I was dual booting it first, but I
Uh,
literally never logged into Windows on this machine, so it was just taking up space that I could have been using for virtual machines and things like that. So I ended up getting rid of it.
I'd have you send me another laptop, but I don't know what I'd do with another, LP player.
Yeah, for a little background, folks, I sent him a 17-inch Toshiba sometime last year, and what he received on the other end was a really nice PC enabled or PC compatible
Record
turntable.
player, yeah.
Yeah, which would be a cool thing to have, but that's not what I sent him. Presumably,
If I
I
had any
think
records to play, it might be.
I feel like that was somebody's uh, Amazon return, and my laptop got sent to Amazon instead of that turntable, so it's sitting up against a wall somewhere in a return center right now because I
Forgotten.
gotta I gotta believe that if that went to a regular person, they would have took it to UPS and would have been like, well, what is this? The only thing that bothers me most of all about that is that it had two hard drives in it, and I don't think there's anything on there that would I'd have to deal with, but you just never know.
Yeah.
So
All
anyway,
right. Moving on to security and privacy. Okay. Serious Linux kernel security hole uncovered. Just what every Linux system administrator wants just before the holidays. A serious Linux kernel security bug. The Zero Day Initiative, a zero day security research firm, announced a new Linux kernel security bug. This hole allows authenticated remote users to disclose sensitive information and run code on vulnerable Linux kernel versions. How bad is it? Originally, the ZDI rated it a perfect 10 on the 0 to 10 Common Vulnerability Scoring System scale. Now, the hole's only a 9.6. That still counts as a patch it now bug on anyone's Linux server. The problem lies in the Linux 5.15 in kernel server message block server KSMBD. The specific flaw exists within the processing of SMB2 tree disconnect commands. The issue results from the lack of validating the existence of an object prior to performing operations on the object. An attacker can leverage this vulnerability to execute code in the kernel context. This new program, which was introduced to the kernel in 2021, was developed by Samsung. Its point was to deliver speedy SMB3 file serving performance. SMB is used in Windows and Linux via Samba as a vital file server protocol. KSMBD is not intended to replace Samba, but to complement it. Samba and KSMBD developers are working on getting the programs to work in concert. That said, Jeremy Allison, Samba's co creator, notes KSMBD shares no code with production Samba. It's completely from scratch, so this current situation has nothing to do with the Samba file server you may be running on your systems. Any distro using the Linux kernel 5.15 or above is potentially vulnerable. This includes Ubuntu 2204 and its descendants and Deepin Linux 20.3. For server purposes, Ubuntu is the most concerning. Other enterprise distros such as Red Hat Enterprise Linux family do not use the 5.15 kernel.
and I am happy to report I am not running Samba on any of my servers.
Same here, I gave up on Samba a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, with the only reason I was using it in the past was I was running the media server, and then I had Kodi installed on all of the client machines upstairs, and they were connecting through Samba. That's not actually how I was moving files on and off. I was using the SFTP to do that. So once I stopped, well, yeah, using um, Jellyfin instead of Kodi negated the need for Samba to be running at all. So I just did away with it. One less attack surface, you know. But I remember hearing about this kernel thing a year or so ago, and it was being sold as a huge performance upgrade potentially for Samba running on Linux systems because it was going to be handled in kernel space. Uh,
Yeah, even Leo says on the YouTube that he uses SSHFS,
yeah,
which would be my suggestion. That's what I use when I need to mount a drive. So Samba for me has been a no go for a while. It was always way too hacky and
yeah.
iffy on connection.
It really felt insecure, and it, I always thought of it as if you had a reason where you needed Windows machines and Linux machines to be able to share the same sort of protocol without having to get real hacky, I suppose, with the Windows machines. It was the best way to do it. But yeah, SSHFS and then
FS.
just SFTP, works just fine. So
Yeah, I have to wonder how well SSHFS would work with the Windows subsystem for Linux.
I
Yeah,
haven't tried that uh, since they've updated it. I'd be interested if somebody knows anything about that right into the show.
right. Because if you had like that set up and then you mounted a drive using SSHFS from the Windows subsystem for Linux, then would the Windows system be able to interact with that mounted drive? That would be my question.
That would be, yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. It's being sold as though it's a completely integrated system. Leo says it works fine with WSL. So there you
And
go.
he also says Samba was too complicated. If something broke, God help you, which is basically what we were saying. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. WSL added native NTFS access.
Okay, so it
Thank God for
probably
that.
does work the way I was asking. So that would be perfect.
But again,
Okay.
no use in my case. So,
Yeah. Well, I always have a use for SSHFS.
yeah.
So
And
all
Kodi
right.
and things like that are quite happy connecting with SSHFS or SFTP. So,
What we're saying is until this kernel issue gets patched, stay away from Samba.
yeah, if at all possible.
All right, moving on to the bi-weekly wanderings. First up, me. All right. Well, it's been a long couple of weeks, but I still feel like I have not gotten much done, although my notes say otherwise. Lots of 3D printing. Finally got the second completed Bluetooth device all printed and put together, and it snaps together instead of having to be glued together. So, I can get to the internals later on and repair them as needed. Um, I also 3D printed a fume extractor that looks like Kirby. I used the instructions that were provided, and I had the suggested 40 millimeter fan handy, but I did not have a separate power supply that would provide the needed 12 volts. But I did find one. Now, I was debating whether or not to use some 5-volt 40 millimeter fans, and that was what I was going to do. But then I changed my mind, and I'm sticking with the 24-volt one, or the 12-volt one that I have. I have another 24-volt one that's specifically for my Ender 3, but I'm going to use the 12-volt one, and I have a universal power supply that will power it, and I ordered some barrel connectors that will match up with the universal power supply, and I'm going to be putting those together, and that will complete the build once I get some carbon filters, and we'll see how well that works. Now, I also got some interesting things for Christmas. I got a PSP. My wife, Jackie, got it for me, and I love working on those devices. The seller had a good price for it, so I don't really have any complaints, but I do want to tell the truth about what I found in regards to the device. First of all, it came with a theater case that provides extra battery power and also provides much louder audio. It's a little crackly, but it actually does work pretty well, which I checked the value of, and it more than covers the cost of what was paid for it. But then comes the fun. My expectations might be a bit high in regards to this. Let me know what you think about it. This device had a custom silver case or chrome colored case that was really in exceptional condition, other than one crack along the where the battery goes in, the battery cover. Um, but there was only two of the seven screws that normally holds the device together that were actually in the device. So it was kind of coming apart. The battery would not hold a charge. It's fairly normal for a device of that age. I had a couple of good batteries available, and I put one in the device, and it would make noise, but the screen would not turn on. Now, I took the device apart and I noticed that the backlight ribbon cable was disconnected. So I hooked it up and I turned the device on. Turns out the screen is very, very broken. So I pulled the screen from a working device and put it in for testing. Mostly working device. That works out fine. The device powers on and it has a very cool Halloween themed background. I checked it out, and it already has a custom ROM on it, so it can already run any of the games that I want to directly from the SD card. I load up one of my memory cards that I have set up, and sure enough, it works just fine. I think the version needs an update, but that is fine. I have some screws from other builds that I used to put it all back together, and I tested the UMD drive. It actually shows that it sees the disk, but it cannot read the disk. Not that big of a deal. I can eventually either pull the drive completely, the UMD drive completely, and put in a much larger battery, or I can replace the UMD drive. I'll figure that out later. Also, the fancy casing that it has, UMD drive does not stay closed very well until after I bent it into the correct position. All right, we have an issue here.
That wasn't disruptive at all.
Not at all. Did he drop or did you kick him?
I'm I was getting ready to because he was echoing and everything. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Did he
Sorry
drop?
about that, folks. Yeah, I think he dropped. I didn't do anything to him.
But yeah, so whoever had this PSP before me knew enough to be able to put a custom case on, even though they didn't, put in the put all the screws back in. And um, they knew enough to originally take out the screen and put the screen in, but then didn't hook the backlight up correctly because they knew the screen was broken. It's just little things and they knew enough to put a custom ROM onto it, but then they make all this mistakes putting it together. It just something about it was a little off, but the price wasn't bad. So, like I said, overall, I'm happy with the device. Those are just things that bother me, especially since they had it listed as needs battery, can't test, even though it was clearly falling apart. Um, and I don't know if it was the last guy that had it or if it was the guy before him that had it. So we'll see. I also got a Wii for Christmas. Now, I've never worked on a Wii before. This one's supposed to be working just fine. I do need to verify the cables. I think I'm not sure what video cable it uses, but I will look into that. And I need to research how to mod it and what mods are available. I understand you can even play GameCube games on it. Um, and I've never had one before, and it will be fun to work on. I got Nextcloud installed on my phone so that I can work on show notes while at the office when things are going slow. Yes, I can monitor applications or take a meeting and handle different things all at once. I also wanted to mention that there have been a lot of overall improvements to Bluetooth in Linux. I found out a lot of the recent problems that I had had with Bluetooth had to do with keyboards reconnecting. But it turns out that some of that had to do with the dongles that were hooked up to my computer. I'm using Bluetooth a lot more, but when I do, I make sure that there are no other keyboards hooked up wireless using dongles. That seems to clear up a lot of the reconnection issues that I was having. I don't know if it was interference between the devices or if the devices were getting confused about the connection, about what connection to use, but removing the 2.5 gigahertz dongles clears up the issue entirely, and devices will reconnect with little issue and minimal delay. Now, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing again because it's something that I can do while doing other things. I have a lot of PET-G that was ready to print, which, I gave it a try. Um, I have had some success with PET-G in the past, even without an enclosure. This time around, it worked for a while. I was able to get several prints without an issue. Then I switched to a transparent red PET-G, and I had a print that started out pretty well, but partway through, it started just grinding and popping. I unclogged the nozzle and started the print over. This time, it did not get in as far in, so what I ended up doing was replacing the nozzle and trying again. Same thing. Okay, I switched back to the black PET-G with another new nozzle. I tried to print one of the same things that I had printed before with the same settings, and it just would not print. Under extrusion, build plate adhesion, always something. I mean, it would start out looking like over extrusion, then it would go and look like under extrusion to the point where you touch it and it'd be falling apart and flaking apart. So I switched to a 0.6 millimeter nozzle. I cranked up the heat and I tried again. Still, it could not come up with a solid print. So I ended up putting away the PET-G and pulled out a spool of PLA. I reset all my settings and it started printing fine and everything started coming out real good again. So I don't know what it is about the PET-G for now. I will come back to it at a later date. I still have a bunch of ABS that I also need to use up, but that is definitely something that requires an enclosure. I'm going to have to get my enclosure fixed for that. Okay, now I think I've talked about Audio Bookshelf on the show before, but maybe not, so I wanted to discuss it now. I was talking to Bill about it the other day, and he did not remember me talking about it on the show, so I want to make sure that it's mentioned.
Which,
It
by the
is
way, does not mean it didn't happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. It has replaced Listen Audiobook Player for me, and also because of the well-designed server, it has also replaced my need to have BT Sync and or BT Sync slash Resilio Sync installed on my phone or my desktop. It's very similar to what Subsonic was back in the day, but with a better implementation and a lot less fragmentation, at least at this point. I am using this every day in the same way I used to use Subsonic or MadSonic. It's kind of like Plex, but for audiobooks and podcasts. Instead of having anything saved on my phone, I can just access my library from anywhere that I have an internet connection. I have used the download function in order to make sure that when I know that I'm not going to have internet, I can still have a book. But mostly it hasn't ever been a problem, except like one time when the internet was out in my neighborhood and I had to force a local connection instead of using my what DNS. It's also a great way to stop most of like the podcast downloads directly to my phone. I let Audio Bookshelf handle all the downloads to my computer, and then I just stream from my home server to my phone as needed. Um, One of the other great things about it is that I can track my spot in books and podcasts across multiple devices. So if I want to listen from my PC, that's fine. If I want to listen from my phone, that's fine. If my phone dies and I got to switch to my backup phone, it's all good. I can just pick up right where I left off.
I hadn't heard of this until yesterday when we had that conversation, and uh, Joe shared the link to his server, and I got signed on, and of course he's got a rather brilliant uh, library uh, accumulated over time, I imagine. But I had not heard of this, and I was kind of looking for a self-hosted solution. Kind of not. I had heard of things in the past, but this, I got to say, it was brilliant. I mean, just to use, and just out of curiosity, I thought, well, how hard is it to spin it up and self-host it? So um, I downloaded the Docker, pulled the Docker image and spun it up and wrote out the Docker Compose, and I put some audiobooks into the folder that it needed to be. Man, I had that up and running in 10 minutes. Put it behind, made a subdomain for my personal domain, and then pointed it at my IP and put it behind my reverse proxy and did all the SSL stuff, and now I've got it spun up, and it's basically the best way I can describe it for anybody that does any self-hosting is it's like a Jellyfin or a Plex for audiobooks, and it's flawless, and it's easy to use. I think it's well laid out the way um, as far as the controls to add books, and if inevitably sometimes you'll get some metadata mismatch just because of the way files end up getting named, and tags end up being kind of wrong in the file, and that, but it's got easy to use controls to sort all that out for you.
Yeah,
And
that's the hardest part for me, especially because I have such, a
yeah,
huge library.
huge library.
It's going through and finding out where it doesn't have the correct metadata and then forcing it to reread it and see what the book is actually supposed to be and list it correctly. And also, it took a lot of initial setup because my folder structure wasn't exactly what Audio Bookshelf needed. So I had to go in and create all the authors folders and then series folders and the stuff like that. And
Yeah,
like we said, my library is quite extensive because I've
yeah.
been collecting audiobooks for 20 years now. So,
Amazing project, and I make sure you get it linked on here too. It's audio
oh yeah,
bookshelf.
yeah. I forgot to drop the link into the check this out, but I'll do that.
Right.
I also wanted to mention that I joined the Discord, and I was actually able to talk to the developer, the guy that's developing this, and he's going to fix my one issue with Audio Bookshelf, which is the fact that you can only increase the playback speed to 3x. Um, he didn't quite understand why I would want to go beyond 3x, and then I did explain that I've been doing audiobooks for a really long time and worked the night shift for a really long time, and it took a while, but I built up to 4 and 5x. Um, but he's planning on removing the limit in the next version and making the limit, instead of being 3x, it's going to be 10x. Not that I think I'm going to get up to 10x, but 4 or 5 will be nice. I like the slightly faster speeds and getting done with books more quickly, so I can move on to the next book.
And it's
I hope
fun to
this
have the
application.
chipmunks read your books for you.
Well, there's. It's not like back in the day with like tapes, where when you crank up the speed, you're not getting that pitch shift. With these applications today, you get pitch shift along with the change of speed, so it still sounds normal, just
Oh,
faster.
there was my age showing.
Yep, magnetic. Um, and like I said, 4 or 5 would be nice. And I think I may do some of the like requested write ups that he has on his website that he was asking for donations, since there's no like monetary donation button that I could find. Because when I find an application that I really like, even if it is free, I like donating at least something to the people that made it, so that they feel incentivized to keep making it. But that's about it for me. How about you, Bill?
Well, not a heck of a lot, really. For starters, I hope everyone had a great holiday season if you so partake. For my part, Christmas was a bit more of a muckabout this year, partially because of the weather. The Friday before Christmas was the day the wife and I did our last minute shopping. Well, our usual yearly last minute shopping, which this year literally meant nearly all of the shopping. We really kind of dropped the ball this year. The temperatures that day dropped down to down and around 20 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, with the wind chill, and snow
That's
was,
called a nope.
yeah, well, I
If you're not
mean,
aware, that's a nope.
yeah, and I'm on the road all week, and these last few months it's literally been me on the road from Monday morning until Friday night, and this particular week, since I was off Friday, I was literally gone until Thursday night, so we had no choice. Um, the snow was blowing straight sideways across the roads, making it icy, and the road salt that is commonly used in this part of the country doesn't work at those temperatures, just simply because it can't do whatever it does to melt the ice. Um, which made the travel slow and arduous, because we actually go down to the next town south of us, which is about, I don't know, about a 25 to 30-minute drive to a couple of the stores down there. It's just kind of a thing we do every year. It's become sort of a tradition for the wife and I, and also because the you go to the smaller towns, the stores are markedly less crowded than they are in the city here. Um, Christmas Eve, then I drove down to Indianapolis to pick up my oldest son to bring him uh, back to spend the holidays with us, and it took. It's well on a normal day. It's about an hour and 45 minutes between Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Indianapolis, and that day it took nearly 3 hours with four-wheel drive on the whole trip. I spent about $270 in gasoline over the course of that 3-day weekend. Uh, he was having some car problems, so and it was kind of clear that if somebody didn't go get him, that he would have been stuck down in Indianapolis by himself with nothing going on, and yeah, so I drove down there to get him. Taking him home on Christmas Day was slightly less dramatic. It was still cold, but the some of the blowing had calmed down, and the roads had kind of gotten a little bit cleared up. Not completely. I still had to use the four-wheel drive for a few minutes here and there on that trip. Not the whole way though, but still, I mean, $270 in gas. My pickup truck uses about 3 times as much gas with the four-wheel drive on as it does without it. So because it's real four-wheel drive, where it's literally spinning all four tires at the same speed, and it just tears the tires up. Um, so yeah, that was. It is what it is, though. You do what you got to do. On New Year's Eve, we did an all-inclusive Three Fat Truckers recording. For those of you that don't know, I do a another podcast that's slightly less tech-oriented, to say the least. Um, but we decided we was going to do a New Year's Eve thing where we invited everybody that wanted to participate on the Video Ninja stream. It wasn't live streamed. It was recorded because I just didn't know if we were going to run into something that I needed to edit out before uploading it because we've tried as best we can to make the show a little less adult oriented, and for better or worse, we've yeah, um, we've done okay for the most part until well shows like that, and that went on for 2.5 hours, and we had a good time. Um, I can definitely say that the second law of thermodynamics was hard at work because the virtuousness of the conversation deteriorated consistently over the course of the show, and that was partly due to the alcohol consumption by everyone involved.
It has been my understanding that when you put three truckers in a room with alcohol, that type of thing is expected.
Yeah, well, and in this case, it was like bouncing back between 4 and 6. So, and then Dave's got this new. He loves this audio interface that he bought for like $500, and it's got Bluetooth built into it. So he was calling people on the phone, and one part that got edited out was some his neighbor. How at one point he had a neighbor call up 80-year-old lady next door, and she was feeling particularly frisky, and that's as far as I'll go with that. I had to edit it out. That's how bad it was. So, but it was fun because we were good and we were pretty well liquored up by that point. And anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But we had a good time. A lot of people joined in, and some people on the phone, some people on the video. I mean, it was a bit for people to work out how to get on there on their phone. I had no expectation going into it. Um, Tech wise, I've not had a whole lot going on. I did finalize towards the beginning of our time off. I finalized all the work of migrating all the web servers that I administer from the cloud to devices on my LAN. So I literally don't have anything running on the cloud anymore. Previously, we had mintCast.org running on Linode, and we do not now. That's actually running on this Pi 400 right here next to me now, and it's been flawless. I say flawless. It was flawless until today when Joe mentioned that there was a problem with one of the links on the home page, which I don't know how that got past me, but it was pointing towards an internal IP address, the RSS link on the front, and that happens when you set up a website. Well, when you migrate a website from one machine to another, and you start it up without like doing all the configuration on the back end to point it to the right URL. You
Yeah,
you start.
and the only reason I knew that it was broken was because I was setting up Audio Bookshelf with podcasts to test out that functionality.
Well, it was a good catch because I had thought sometimes you got to go through when you set it up that way and you don't tell it that it's mintcast.org. You're setting it up on your own machine and you're going to do all the forwarding afterwards. Well, it thinks that it's just on your LAN and it sets all your permalinks up accordingly. And when you go to change it in the WordPress settings, some stuff will get changed automatically, and other stuff you got to go through every single thing you've got linked on that website and make sure that it's set up to go right. And somehow I missed that. Well, but that also, in the course of trying to fix that, it uncovered well, I really don't know how to articulate the problems it was giving me because I was trying to change it to the proper link, and it literally crashed on me. And it turned out to be I was using a plugin to provide some caching for the object, for all the static objects and everything like that. because it was complaining. WordPress was complaining that it needed a persistent object cache, so I installed that on there. I didn't notice any increase in performance, but it's stopped complaining about it. Well, I think that cache was making it screw up somehow, so I deactivated that plugin and it started working again. So yeah, up until I fixed that problem, it was running great, and it's running great again now, as far as I know. I think I'm just going to leave it alone. But now I'm running. Oh gosh, um, the website for Linux OTC, which is a show that um, I guess I won't say much more about it, but it's a show that we're working on trying to get running. Uh, that we hope to have episodes real soon. The website for that I'm running on this Rock Pro 64 that's kind of off camera. Three Fat Truckers, 3ftpodcast.org. I got that running on a Pi 4 right here, and all of our cloud infrastructure and all that's running here behind me. So we're not paying any cloud services anymore for any of this stuff. I've got links in the show notes to these websites just to kind of show off my my considerable sysadmin skills that I've literally just developed in the last 11 months.
Mm.
But yeah, that's about all I've had going on.
I completely forgot to mention I mentioned it like at the start of the show, but during my biweekly, I completely forgot to mention the HPR New Year's show. So I did that this year. I was on there for several hours today. Got to talk to some of my favorite podcasters, and Moss was on there with me for a good chunk of it, and a bunch of the people that I podcast with on Linux Lugcast were on there, and good conversations were had by all. I know that Hunky Magoo is working on the audio edit, and he's getting some help this year. So hopefully it'll be before July when it hits HBR. But when it hits their RSS feed, I mean. But they were really pushing hard. They're looking for more people to publish shows. So if you want to record a show and have it published, but you don't want to like create your own RSS and don't want to do multiple shows, you just want to give one tutorial or something like that, head over to HBR and have it put up there and see what people think about it. And even if you just want to test out podcasting, try it there. Or, contact us and we need more hosts.
Yeah. Uh, we need to stress that a little bit more, actually. We could probably use a couple more people, actually. But if anybody wants to get started in podcasting, man, I'll tell you what, it's been
Join next
transformative for
Saturday's
my
show.
life. What's that?
Join next Saturday's live stream.
Yeah, we do on the weekends opposite of our regular release. We do what we call a roundtable on Saturdays at 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and we do that on our Discord channel. It is the mintCast General Voice channel, and
Link in the show notes.
yeah, link in the show notes. We will we literally invite everybody in the community to participate on all of those. Um, it's kind
And
of
then if you want to be a host, we will give you access to everything
yeah,
and make sure your audio sounds good. It's better to do it on the off week than it is the on week. And get you all set up and make it as seamless as possible, as easy as possible for you.
yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I got to tell you, it's a lot of fun to be a
And
part of a show like this.
yeah, it doesn't really matter your skill level either. If you're a newbie or if you have 20 years of Linux admin experience, we would love it in either case. As a newbie, you can provide some insight into the learning process. And as somebody with 20 years of experience, you're someone with 20 years of experience that we would absolutely love to have your ideas on the show.
That's actually a good point because somebody who is just kind of starting out in their journey, we've been using Linux for 20 years. You kind of, I don't want to say we've forgotten a lot of the process that we were in the beginning, but there's a lot of value in somebody being a part of the conversation that might not be completely fluent with all of the language and that, and it can really help out a lot of people that might
There's
be
a lot of
listening to
things
the
that we
show that,
take for granted that they would bring to the show
yeah,
for other new users.
yeah, that's excellent.
Okay, and that is it for our biweeklies. Bill, you got anything else?
Nope, I'm good to go.
All right, let's move on to our innards. Okay, first up in our innards, we got last year's predictions, and these are just the order that they were presented in. We didn't have a lot of community interaction this year with community predictions, but we did have a bit more from last year. Now, first up was me. I said that the Steam Deck will be a success and will contribute to the number of Linux machines in the wild. Um, Actually, yeah, it's had a distinct effect on the number of on the percentage of Linux machines in the wild, and I think it actually has been a really great success, and I hope it continues on. And I am definitely going to give myself a +1 for that. Uh,
Uh, I will say that the Steam Deck has been such a success that the fear some people had that people would get their hands on it and the first thing they'd want to do is put Windows on it, that has not really materialized as far as I
no,
know because it
that's
works
like
so well.
that's like saying that everybody that gets a Windows machine is automatically going to rush out and put Linux on it. And no, it's whatever's there is what most people, 90% of people, are going to stick with. See what I'm saying?
Yep,
So
absolutely.
I'm
If it
I'm
works
really
well enough,
happy. Yeah,
if it
I'm
works well enough.
really happy with how well the Steam Deck did. But I still didn't get one because if I had, it'd be busy collecting dust most days.
Now, as
Now,
far as it contributing to the number of Linux machines in the wild, of course, there's no way to know for sure. I mean, it
well,
feels like there's.
according to Steam, the number of computers are running X operating system, which they track, of course, because
Mm,
you have to download a specific version of Steam for it. The percentage of Linux devices has gone up.
well, I wonder if that is directly due to the number of
You're right.
Steam decks
Correlation
in
doesn't
people's
equal
hands.
causation, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that yes, it would have had a dramatic effect.
What I was hinting towards was sort of, I was kind of hoping that they would have released their desktop version of the operating system by now, um, Steam OS, because that's, I think a lot of people were still are kind of
Hoping
eagerly
to use it.
anticipating that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then my next prediction. The chip shortage will continue and prices on computers will remain high. And that's mostly been true. It's come down some. We're still in the rebound from that, but yeah, it's mostly still a thing. But that should be corrected in this new year. So
All one
one
need do
again
is
for
go
that.
look for a Raspberry Pi,
Yeah,
and that,
yeah.
yep.
Okay, and then here, my next one. Graphics card prices will somewhat return to normal as a new hardware competitor will come out that will be better for crypto than graphics cards. Now, I was completely right about graphics card prices being corrected, but I was completely wrong about the cause of it because it's not that better hardware came out for crypto. It's that crypto crashed so hard that nobody's using graphics cards for that anymore, and so the prices of graphics cards went down because the market's flooded with used graphics cards. So I'm gonna say 0.5 on that one.
It's too bad we don't have a some sort of moderator on here.
Right, right, right.
Uh,
Make Leo rejoin and come moderate.
well, he's on here. Um, Norbert couldn't be with us today, but he had predictions as well. Um, he had four of them, in fact. His first one is when using the proprietary NVIDIA drivers on Ubuntu, Wayland will be at least enabled on Ubuntu 22.04 and will be the default session in 22.10.
Did that happen? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
I think
I,
so.
I know a lot of things are switching to Wayland, but
Yeah.
hmm.
Um, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the NVIDIA drivers, but I think that is a reality. So he'll get one for that, I think.
Yeah, give him one. All right.
His second one, Endeavor OS, will be in first place on DistroWatch on the default 6 month ranking list at some point during the year. I can't,
I haven't watched Distro Watch enough to tell you.
not certainly not throughout the whole year, but I don't think it was number one at any point, or at least it never was at any point that I. Let's tentatively say no to that, and if somebody knows better, by all means, let us know. But I don't think it was ever at the very top, just because it's a fine distro and it's excellent, but it's Arch, pure and simple.
Yeah,
It's just a
well, I'm still seeing it as number two for 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, and 1 month
well.
on their site.
He says first place.
Like I said,
That's
I'm seeing
pretty.
it at two.
Yep. Sorry, Norbert. GTK theming. This is his third. GTK theming will still be viable with GTK 4, but with libraries as opposed to CSS. And I think what's he referring to here? The libid Weta stuff and all that.
Yeah.
And I think, boy, if anybody knows any better, I feel like, yeah, that's a plus one, but
Probably.
I don't know technically how all that works. So
I don't either.
I feel like, yeah, GTK4 is kind of leaning heavily on the libid Weta thing. So, and finally, increased focus on Wayland will lead to development of the X12 protocol, and that was a moonshot. What was his implication here, that Xorg would feel as though they needed to offer something as a
I
competitor to
guess.
Wayland?
Yeah, but that didn't happen.
No, not even close.
Okay. And then Josh Hawk also had his predictions. He said the Steam Deck will succeed, and not everyone will cancel their orders. That is a distinct one. That's a soft one right there. I mean, that was a softball, super easy.
Yeah, way to go, Josh.
Now, Steam OS will only be really good on the Steam Deck, and well, yes, that's true because it hasn't been released for anything else. Uh, I have to give him that one too. That's another softball. Pop OS will have at least a beta of their new DE by end of 2022. I haven't seen any news on that. Have you?
No, so far, really, it's still just uh, a set of extensions on top of GNOME. So,
Okay, okay. Community arguments about GNOME will worsen and lead to many leaving GNOME as users. I'm going to put a no on that because
no.
while there's always, you know, crap around GNOME, there hasn't been enough to really take away from the user base.
And I feel like a lot of that has kind of tamped down a little bit
Yeah.
as people have started to realize how it wasn't nearly as dramatic of a change as everybody thought it was going to be, and in fact, it might have made things easier in some ways. But I don't know. I don't feel like it's made people leave in droves. The initial response by GNOME made more people leave than the actual implementation of the changes itself. So it was
Yeah.
always going to be just a matter of bad communication and people, and their good or bad people skills. I think some
Yeah.
people should have the job of dealing with the community, and some people should probably stay away from it, especially when you're
Mm,
talking about uh, a popular project like this or a widely used project like this.
yeah. Okay, and he had one more. He
Yeah.
said Alma Linux will become more popular than RHEL slash CentOS Stream.
Ah,
And I'm gonna have to say that's a nope.
nah.
That's a big nope. But yeah, it's hard to get past RHEL, but it's not all that hard to get past CentOS Stream because yeah, I don't know how many people are actually using CentOS Stream or CentOS Stream.
What's the one that CERN is using that was in the news not long ago?
I don't remember.
I don't know if it was
You'd
Alma
have to
or
look it up.
Rocky. Nishant, he had 5 predictions
CentOS
as
Stream.
oh, is it CentOS Stream?
I
Well, there
think
you
so.
go.
Or yeah, it's CentOS Stream 8 or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, depending for some services and applications.
Well, there you go. Uh, Nishant, who hasn't been on the show in a while now, he had some predictions as well. The first one, another one of them, they're softballs. Gaming on Linux will
Mm-hmm.
pick up. Um, I suppose, yeah, it's picked up. Of course, it
Yeah.
did. This is the year the Steam Deck was released, and Proton and all that. Fedora will lead the forefront in adoption of latest kernel slash desktop environment. So,
He would need to come on here and explain some there before
so
I was
if we
willing to give
just
him any points.
yeah, because if we was just to take this at face value, Fedora, I mean, most of Fedora's shtick is that you're getting the latest kernel um, and the latest. Well, you're getting the latest, pretty much the latest of everything on Fedora. So yeah, you're going to get the latest kernel and the latest desktop environment. Um, there's even been times where they've gotten things before Arch did. So um, I guess yeah, these are about as soft a ball as it gets.
Yeah, but he would need to come on and explain before I gave him that second one there.
Yeah, we'll read these just for fun though.
Yeah.
And well, this was a personal. So this was a personal prediction, so we have no way of knowing whether or not this actually happened. It says,
Yeah.
"I will make my foray into Linux system administration," and don't know. He's not been
I know he, he,
participating.
he, he got employed, but I don't know what his employment ended up being.
Yeah. Okay. Linux phones will double in number and power in 2022. That's a hard no. Um,
Pretty much.
I don't know. I wish I had more faith in that ever happening, but I think there's a few things that would need to happen in order to facilitate something like that, and making the baseband work in the United States would be, for starters. I know
The,
people like to
yeah.
act like they don't use their phones for LTE and 4G and 5G, but here in the States they absolutely do.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
seriously, if someone could just get the an application that would handle, well, the data, of course, but the messaging and the phone calls on a Linux phone, then the rest of it could just sort itself out. I mean, seriously, the rest of it's all hardware at that point.
yeah.
I don't know what the problem is.
Well, part of the problem is I think it's illegal in the United States to have an open firmware.
Hmm.
on on a
Yeah. Well,
device.
that means you can't have everything open, but
You can't
like
have the
Pine,
baseband.
right? Pine has gotten around that by having essentially separate hardware that sticks onto the board that has the proprietary blurbs for the
The
different
baseband, yeah.
radios. The yes,
Yeah, unfortunately, until you start seeing it show up in the Verizon stores and the AT&T stores here in the States, it's not going to double in number. I don't know. I suppose double what it's already got, I suppose, is viable. But I don't know. So far, no. I have high hopes for it, but they're, it is what it is. And then finally, he says, I am throwing my elbows out here, but Linux will overtake Mac OS in market share by the end of 2022. And I think no, but uh, referring everybody back to our article about it increasing in market share for in adoption, I should say,
significant.
by uh, by developers, and that is absolutely a thing. Um, but as far as overtaking Mac OS, that's
Yeah.
not going to happen. Um, okay, so literally, my first podcast ever in my entire life was the predictions episode uh, where we're getting all these from, and I came up with two of them
Congratulations.
right off the top of my head when we were on the stream, and I feel like I knocked it out of the park. Uh, and I'm sure somebody's going to argue, but my first one was the Steam Deck will not ship in February, and I think I'm vindicated by an article. Uh,
Yeah, it was delayed
yeah,
multiple times.
people started getting an email on the 28th of February saying that, okay, we're ready, start shipping, and things started happening right about that time. But as far as I think what it was they had made an announcement towards the end of 2021 that they were going to ship in February, and it at the time it just didn't feel like it was going to happen. Did they make good? Yeah, I think they did. They absolutely did. And you can, if you ordered one now, you can certainly get it. There's no waiting list.
Yeah.
Um, and my second one was Asahi Linux will gain hardware acceleration on the Mac. And here's another article where on the 28th of February they announced OpenGL drivers for Asahi Linux. So, or yeah, the
We'll give
28th
you
of
that one.
December, not
Well,
February.
there was some also information later on in the year, if I remember right, where they were talking about improved hardware acceleration on
Yeah.
the M1,
Yep. So
and then the M2 came out.
I don't know that it's a huge stretch from
Yeah.
getting it working on the M1 to getting it working on the M2. But there you go. That's me hitting it out of the park.
All right. And then we get to move on to our 2023 predictions. And first up, I'm going to read Moss's stuff. He wasn't able to be here today, but he wanted to make sure that his predictions were included. Now, Moss predicts that there will be at least two new distros, one Arch based and the other Debian based, which someone somewhere, major podcast or YouTube channel, will proclaim to be the greatest distro ever, and that not everyone will sneer at the thought. One of these will begin to get serious attention. Now, like most of this, Moss can actually, make that happen by being on a podcast and a YouTube channel. So, because obviously there's going to be another Arch based distro and another Debian based distro that comes out this year. Now, he also predicts that almost everyone will continue to mostly ignore fascinating distros such as Serpent OS and Nix OS, and that Solus OS will fall into the same level of unimportance. And yeah, that's probably going to happen. And he also predicts that either React OS or Haiku OS will put a version out which is not labeled beta. I don't know about that one. And then he also predicts that Distro Hopper's Digest will exceed 40,000 total downloads. This will mean an average of over 900 listeners per episode. This could be easier or more difficult to determine as Google has shut down FeedBurner and they've had to switch to Red Circle, which they don't have any experience, so they don't know how the counting will happen. And then he predicts that Big Linux will rise into the top 20 distros on DistroWatch by the end of the year. Sorry, I think I have to sneeze. But
Don't you hate that?
oh, it's like right there.
And then you need
No,
to make
you
it
should
happen,
read his
but it
first
won't.
one. You had stepped away for a second while I was
Yeah, I
reading
did.
his first one, but I think he can make a lot of that happen there. He predicts that there will be at least two new distros, one Arch-based and the other Debian-based, which is, that's probably going to happen. And which someone somewhere, either a podcast or a YouTube channel, will proclaim to be the greatest distro ever, which, all he has to do is get on one of his podcasts and say this will be the greatest distro ever. And not everyone will sneer at the thought.
Nice
And he
try,
gets
Moss.
that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Well done.
We love you, Moss.
We do.
Okay, and then my predictions. I predict that the Steam Deck V2 will launch to much further success sometime this year, or at least be announced sometime this year. Pies will become much more accessible, and there will be no new model in the main line or the Zero line this year.
Ooh, more on that later.
Because they've surprised us before. They said that there wasn't going to be a Pi 4, and
They've
then there
outright
wasn't going to be a
lied
Pi
before.
4. And then come July, hey, look, here's a Pi 4.
Yeah. And that's like the second or third time that happened, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But I still don't think there's going to be a new one this year. I think that they're once their supply issues get all sorted, it'll be towards the end of the year, and they'll actually be selling the 4s again and the 0W2s again, and everybody will be happy with that. So why release a fifth edition this year when you can do it next year after you've capitalized on all of what can be sold of the 4s this year? And then we're going to see more handheld devices that follow along with the Steam Deck pattern. Right now, there are a lot of handhelds with Windows or Android as the primary OS. I'm saying we're going to have more with Linux as the primary OS. Okay. And those are my predictions. And I will hold myself accountable on that last one.
I think
when
if
it
that
comes-
last one comes true, it makes the first one come true.
Well, no, there's a difference
Well, I
between
mean, or the other way around.
There's a difference between Steam putting out a Steam Deck 2 and other companies putting, which is what I'm saying here, other companies following
Okay.
along that same
Okay,
pattern.
I got you.
Like, what is it? A&Neo? Because all of theirs are either Android-based or Windows-based. I'm saying that they're going to put out a Steam OS Linux-based style device.
Gotcha.
Now, Londoner also had a prediction. He's saying that Asahi Linux will release a relatively easy install, an ISO or similar image for Apple Silicon by the end of 2023, at least as a public beta. And I hope they do.
Yeah, I kind of think he's right about that. And I might just be wishful thinking, but I think that's probably reasonable. they're getting all the little fine print worked out. They're getting things working one thing at a time. I think, but at least by the end of the year, we'll have something to work with.
Hopefully, hopefully. And yeah, the Mac hardware is always really nice when, especially with their screens and stuff like that. So, I do hope that we are able to run Linux on those reliably sometime soon.
All right, I had four, um, and in a sort of a hedge, or just completely in opposition to one of Joe's predictions. I predict the Pi Foundation will announce, in quotes, the release of the Pi 5, which
It's
means
not
that
in
they,
complete opposition. I mean, if they announced
yeah,
in December that they're doing the Pi 5, then we were both correct.
what I mean is the reason I put that in at all is because I read what you put on there and I thought, and it's all because they've done this in the past. They've said, "Nap, no more pies for this year," and then sure enough, hey, look, the Pi 4.
I'm
And
saying that there's more incentive for them to do the 4s this year and the 5s
yeah,
next
well, you're
year.
absolutely right. The 4 is, they could just keep selling the 4 and do perfectly well. I think the only reasonable iteration they could make on that device is, you know, something with storage, or a better option for storage, or a better option for SATA.
There's a lot they could do. I mean, they could put an IDE controller on there, but they're
Yeah,
not going to. Oh, well, an M2 controller on there, but they're
yeah.
not going to. They could put a SATA controller on there, but they're not going to. The only real things I could see them upgrading is like the Wi-Fi Bluetooth, and because they've already got like massive amounts of RAM on there, so
I
yeah.
just feel like the storage is the biggest bottleneck on that device. I mean, an M2 slot on that. Of course, you'd have to work out the heat and all that, and how it would sit inside the case.
Well, it
It'd
also
be,
adds to the cost
oh yeah,
when you put the M2 on there. It's maybe they put a second USB bus and dedicate that to basically doing what the micro SD card slot used to do.
which you can already do. You can already just plug your. I've got one of these pies over here running that way. It just boots
Right.
right off of the USB 3.
Update the firmware a little bit, and you can boot directly off a USB.
You can do that now. Actually, that's
Yeah, that's yeah.
it works perfectly well.
I
Um,
know.
okay, so my second one, and I think this might be kind of well known already, but it's not officially announced. But Ubuntu will drop ZFS on root support for 2203, um, but will continue to develop the N-tree kernel module. That's where it's not been real clear. It kind of feels like they're trying to shy away from the whole ZFS thing. What I hope they don't do is completely throw the baby out with the bathwater and stop developing the kernel module. The ZFS on root always felt like kind of a, I don't know, what are you guys doing here? You could, the things that ZFS was solving on root could be done with Btrfs, and it's right there in the kernel already. So, um, but I think they're gonna drop ZFS on root support for 2304, but continue to develop the N-tree kernel module, which means by the time the next LTS comes out, you'll still have ZFS support, but it ain't going to be on root. Um, my third one, uh, in sort of a continuation of that thought stream, Ubuntu will begin proper support for Btrfs in the installer, uh, meaning the creation of subvolumes and setting up snapshots and things like that by 2310, having it ready properly for the LTS in 2024. Now, Ubuntu's
Hey,
been working on that new Flutter-based installer that's probably a little bit better set up to put options like that directly into the installer. But that's something that I've been kind of looking forward to for a while. I mean, you can do ButterFS um, right now, but it I don't think they properly handle all of the sub volumes and all that.
Well, we
Um,
got a message from Londoners saying that the future of ZFS doesn't look good on Ubuntu. Actually,
yeah,
provided an article, but that's something for later. But you haven't really heard much about the file system wars this year at all. Um, and not much last year, but like the year before that, it was all ZFS and ButterFS and different file systems vying for supremacy.
well, apparently ButterFS has fixed the. It's always been the ZFS people. They come their biggest one too is the whole RAID 5 and 6 thing, and I've never considered that a viable argument against ButterFS. I've always thought that it was a better idea on root anyway, and it's just I mean it's fine for the server as well. I'm sure 2.5 admins would disagree with everything I just said right there, but I've used both ZFS and ButterFS, and they're both just as good. The one thing ZFS will do that ButterFS won't is the self healing. It's ZFS as it like reads files. It's checking the checksums on everywhere where the file is stored, and if there's a problem, it fixes it right then and there. And you've got one command to run a scrub and fix things on ZFS where you to get the same result you have two commands you have to execute, but beyond that they're both of them are good file systems. I would say ButterFS is probably a good option, better option to use on a Linux root though, just because of its just because of the fact that all of the support is right there in kernel. But that's my prediction as far as that goes. The fourth one is a bit more of a moonshot, and Google will announce a new Pixel device based on the RISC-V architecture,
Yeah, that is a bit of a moonshot.
and that is only because, and I do not have a link to this article, but I have heard excerpts from Google announcing their support for RISC-V officially. I don't know if that amounts to money or developer time or both, but that is a reality. Um, and it's I don't know. It would be cool to announce something by the end of the year that's actually going to materialize because RISC-V is probably a better option. It's probably going to always be a better option for devices like we were talking about earlier, hoping to have a fully open source mobile device. Um, the problem, ARM has got a lot of challenges just due to the underlying architecture and the way things are laid out and how no two ARM chips are pretty much the same. Um, RISC-V seems like uh, it might move things in the right direction, but that's my one moonshot.
Yeah, okay. Well, hopefully it does happen. Okay, let's move on to vibrations from the ether. Okay, and I'm going to read the first two, and I will let you take the last one. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, the first one is actually from my Uncle Ray. So he is now a listener of mintCast. And seriously, this says, "Hi, Joe, from your Uncle Ray. Ray S. Boylan." And the whole thing here is he made sure to include the sent from mail for Windows. So he wanted to make sure that he annoyed me with that. So I wanted to make sure I included it in the show so he knows that his, you know, what he wanted to do worked.
He's listening to the show, so baby
Yep,
steps, I suppose.
yep. Well, no, he actually used to be a programmer, and he actually does occasionally work with Linux, but he just ended up back on Windows because it was easier. So he does got the chops. And then from Richard Hughes, he sent it to my mintCast account, so I wanted to include it here. He says, "Hey Joe, I want to thank you again. I'm using the LiPo charger circuit board again to revive a battery that is not charging." And now what he's talking about is he had asked me about getting replacement batteries for like Bluetooth devices and things like that. And it's a bit of a pain getting properly sized LiPo batteries. And my suggestion was to force charge ones that he thought were completely dead to make sure that they were completely dead. And I gave him a link and I put it in the show notes right below what Rich sent for the TP4056 lithium battery charging board from Amazon. And basically, it's a 5-volt charger that will charge for 3.7 volt lithium ion batteries. And it's a great way to force charge a supposedly dead LiPo and get it working again. So it saves you money in the long run. All you end up having to do is pull the old battery off of whatever device, hook it up to this charger, plug the charger in with micro USB, and then just monitor the charge to make sure that the charge is going up over time. And if it works, then you've saved yourself the hassle of trying to find a new battery, and you just take it off that board and put it on the original board, and you're good to go. So yeah, that's a good thing to have in your Mr. Fix It arsenal.
Finally, we've got an email um, from Nick Connor, and he wrote, "Please help. I am I use Flatpak Audacity in Linux Mint 21, and the track slider is missing when an audio track has been loaded. Also, the layout is different to normal Audacity. I don't use this as it has a habit to make Mint crash. Uh, like the history of Linux. Many thanks. Best regards, Nick." Um, what he's what he's referring to is a known bug where if you start Audacity, and of course, like a normal person, you and this is in the later versions, the 3 dot whatever versions of Audacity, you maximize the window, you import the audio, and of course, it lays it out on the screen from end to end. And of course, if there's any length whatsoever to it at all, you'll need to stretch that out. And normally, what should happen is a horizontal scroll bar should appear at the bottom, and it has not been doing that. And I filed a bug for this, and it turns out some other people have done as well. It's caused a little bit of contention. Um, in fact, I got an email the other day saying that they're not going to fix this uh, as it's not going to be a problem in the QT version. So what they mean by that, I assume, is that moving forward, Audacity 4 and up is going to be based on QT. Right now, it's based on a rather aging toolkit known as WX widgets, and apparently there is some compatibility issues or something. I'm not sure, but they're not going to fix it uh, in the WX widgets library. And if I'm just to assume based on what they said, it's not going to be a problem in the QT version. And then they really didn't make it clear beyond that. Well, is that the direction you're going, or what? But that's the assumption I made. But the workaround, as I described in my email back to him, hey, sorry it took so long to get back with you. I have found the workaround is to unmaximize the window and then remaximize it. That makes the horizontal scroll bar reappear. It's a known bug, and I'm not sure if the Audacity team is interested in fixing it before the next major release. And I wrote that before I received the email back from Audacity saying that they were not going to fix it. Uh, so hopefully the next major release will be based on Qt. I'm a little worried that that means it's going to completely change the way this application looks. I mean, it's been kind of a joke that Audacity has been sort of old fashioned looking and maybe one or two too many magnifying glasses in the UI, but it's Audacity is one of those applications that we rely on in real life, you know, and we need to know how to use the doggone thing. And they've made some pretty huge changes uh, in recent releases that have been useful. One the biggest change they've made is the new SQLite database backend, whereas it basically is creating a database, a small database for your project files. That way, it's less destructive in the way that it saves your projects. Um, and then, of course, they've added support for real time effects, which means that you can add these VST plugins and all that right there to the waveform. Um, I've not been able to get that to work on the Flatpak. Flatpak is a great technology, but it because of the sandbox nature of it, sometimes you have trouble getting third-party plugins to work with certain applications if it wasn't set up to link to those plugins quite so well. Um, I've used the Flatpak in the past, and we've had audio issues as a result of it. I'm using it right now to record. I'm hoping that things go well. Uh, but that being said, yeah, in response to his email, the best thing I can say to do is unmaximize, remaximize. I cannot tell you mechanically why that makes the horizontal scroll bar appear, but it is the workaround that gets it to work. Um, I'm gonna say for most people, if you really don't want to tinker with this, just and if you're on Mint or Ubuntu or something like that, just use the repo version. You're not gonna have the new features like the new database backend or any of that, but you'll have it'll work the way that you expect it to. So there you go. And thanks for everybody that wrote into the show. We really appreciate it. Um,
Yep.
we could,
And he
we're,
did respond with, yes, thank you, that worked.
yes, he did. So that's good. It just that's an important piece of software, and it needs to be better. You know, and you know it's not good enough to just say that. Well, you know that's not the version in your repo or whatever, because that is the version in the repo for things like Arch. I don't know about Fedora. I imagine maybe it is, but just to say that I don't know. It just feels like the vast majority of the real good development goes on the Windows side, but I might be wrong about that.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's the end of vibrations from the ether. Let's move on to check this out. And this won't take very long to check this out because it's just Audio Bookshelf, which we had already mentioned before in the show. I made sure to put the link in there for everybody. And
Yeah.
so on to housekeeping and announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. You can send us an email, mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube, post at the mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at mintcast.org. Our next episode is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, January 22nd, 2023. You can get that converted to your time zone using the links there. And then our next live stream will be at 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, January the 14th, 2023. And also a converter for your time zone is in the show notes. Live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. And in our wrap up, if you like the sound of my voice, you can listen to me on a couple of my other podcasts. I'm on the Linux Link Tech Show, which is at tllts.org. I'm on the Linux Lugcast, which is linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Moss, who wasn't able to make the show today for having to do some other music-related things, you can catch him on a couple other podcasts. He's on Full Circle Weekly News, Distro Hoppers Digest. You can send him an email at hardmoss@pm.me. And other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm bill_h on Discord. I'm at WCHauser3 on Twitter and WCHauser3 on Facebook as well. I've got a Mastodon now I should probably link to. It's at WCHauser3 at fostodon.org or .com. Whatever Fostodon is. Also, check out my new podcast, Three Fat Truckers. The website is 3ftpodcast.org.
Cool. Okay, and before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. There's Audio Freak, Ryu, for our audio editing, archive.org for hosting our audio files, Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time sinks, Bill
And
for
our news.
And our news.
Yeah.
Bill for hosting the Pi 400, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio. And we'd also like to thank the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co.
And it's a wrap.